particularly one that's in the future, and it comes to pass, there's your evidence. And this is kind of what we're dealing with in this section of Isaiah. All right, chapter 18, the first part of it, maybe the whole chapter, is a toughie. I went back, and all I can tell you is what I have learned. If you have learned more than this, please share it. There are several key words here in this first part of chapter 18 that is significant and helps us to understand. First of all, when you hear the word woe, what generally comes to in the Bible context, what generally comes to mind?
Something bad.
Something bad. That is not the word here. That is not the word here. The word here simply means, listen, I am talking to you, pay attention. That's significant in understanding this. Here's what I found. About 725 BC, the king of Ethiopia and Egypt were synonymous, the names. In fact, for a period of about 50 years, the whole area was generally referred to as Ethiopia. But about 725 BC, the king, if my understanding, and some of this history is way over my head, there was a set of pharaohs. Now, Pharaoh is an office name, not an individual name. Number one, okay. But this last of these 10 pharaohs was very cruel. And I can't even begin to pronounce his name. But according to what I read, he sent a group, I guess you would say ambassadors, to Judah for their support, if need be, against the Assyrians. Okay? You got that? Now, listen carefully to the first few verses of chapter 18. Let's see. Will someone read? Let's see now. Let's just read, what is it? Verses 1 and 2. Now, I know this is something we went over this last week with seeming a lot of different opinions, or a lot of different understandings, or maybe misunderstandings. All right, someone read 18 verses 1 and 2.
Alas, O land of roaring wings, which lies beyond the rivers of Cush, which sends envoys by the sea, even in papyrus vessels on the surface of the waters. Go, swift messenger to a nation tall and smooth, to a people feared far and wide, a powerful and oppressive nation, whose land the rivers divide.
Okay. Remember now, according to the history that I read, and way over my head, that the king of Ethiopia, Egypt, synonymous, sent and I don't know how many, a group of ambassadors to Judah to get their support against the Assyrians. This is a response going back to Egypt. In verse 2, you have the word saying. Is it italicized print?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Not in the original.
It was added by the translators, and it caused confusion. The message is going back to the king of Egypt, Ethiopia.
Which word are you talking about?
The word saying in verse 2. Now, that's probably not even there in the American Standard. No, it's not, because it's not there. That's part of the confusion. Now, this is a little, to me, it helps understand this. And they are to say what? Swift ambassadors, swift messengers to a nation tall and smooth of skin. Who's he talking about? The Ethiopians. Okay? Let me get myself all organized here. Okay? Now, number one, let me clarify, where are we now? In verse 2, the sea is referred to in several places as the Nile River in the context. I think it's in chapter 19 and verse 5. It is referred to, the Nile, the sea is referred to for them, not the Mediterranean Sea, but the Nile River. Okay? And then they are to say, go, swift messengers, to a nation tall and smooth of skin, by a people terrible from their beginning onward, a nation powerful and treading down, whose land the rivers divide. Now, I realize that immediately the mind may go to Mesopotamia, the Euphrates, but the Nile River divided the land as well. What Isaiah, well, again, you have to remember, class, okay, hold a minute, let me finish. You have to remember, no translators were inspired. Now, that may shock some of you. I'm not talking about the original writers. No group of translators were inspired.
Right.
Sometimes the quotations may not be accurate.
Right.
You have to understand this. All right, Sarah?
I was just going to say that I did a little.
Now, I'm sorry, I cannot hear you.
I said I did a little looking up too, and I was interested in both the combination of Egypt and Cush or Ethiopia, which were two different, but they did sometimes share leaders. But it also talks about the tall people, and they have one of the tallest tribes, if not the tallest, in the world. And everybody is over 6 foot. If you're 5'11", you're short. And most of them are over 7 foot, the men. And it still continues to be that way. And so it just goes to show that the Bible knows what it's talking about, you know. So.
Okay. This is a little difficult in order to try to understand. Remember, number one, and we have to be careful. We weren't there. They know the history. Whoever is being written to know the history that's around them. We were not there. And some of this is assume you understand what I'm talking about. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not discrediting the Bible. But you remember what John said in John 20, verses 30 and 31? There are many things that are not written. And then he says in verse, is it 21, 23, the last verse of the book? He said, I suppose if they were written, you remember? No, that's of course an exaggeration, but the world couldn't hold the books. So we have what we need. We may not fully understand every word. I don't understand. I'll tell you that right up front all the time. But we cannot forget, tell us, where are you? We cannot forget what?
The big picture.
The big picture. the big picture. We cannot ever forget that. Betty?
I read an article recently about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and almost the whole book of Isaiah was found in those copies, so 1,000 years previous to what they'd had before. And it agrees completely with what is written today.
Yes. These scrolls. And a marvelous, and you know, it's just amazing what the old shovel in that part of the world continues to find. I'll deal with this a little bit later with the King Sargon. We'll deal with that a little bit later on. All right, so this seems to be this is a response back to the messengers that came from Egypt or Ethiopia. Now, watch carefully. According verses, let me see now. Let me find. The quotation goes through verse 2. Now, this is God speaking through Isaiah or God speaking, whichever way it is, it really doesn't matter. But what is interesting is now what follows. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I don't, because if you are interested, you will have to dig it out yourself. I cannot do it for you. It's just that simple. You may leave here totally confused, but you have the resources to clear up that confusion if you're interested. That's entirely left up to you. All right, now, in verse 3, let me just read this because this is all kind of broken down here. All inhabitants of the world and dwellers on the earth, when he lifts up a banner on the mountains, you see it, and when he blows a trumpet, you hear it. We've heard that before, back in chapter 5. This is, of course, how a person or a nation advances. Probably the same, some of you can probably translate this better into modern warfare. Now, what is interesting is what follows now in verse 4. This is, again, according to the translators, a quote. So the Lord said to me, all right, who is the me?
Isaiah.
The me would be Isaiah, okay? I will take my rest, and I will look from my dwelling place, like clear heat in sunshine, like a cloud of dew in the heat of harvest. It seems to me, and all I can share with you is my understanding. Okay, I'm going to sit there, and we're going to observe. I know exactly what's going on. Go to Psalms chapter 2. We read part of this last week. Psalms chapter 2. And if somebody will read 1 through 6. Psalms chapter 2, 1 through 6.
Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us burst their bonds apart and cast away their cords from us.
Now, listen carefully, the next verses.
He who sits in heaven laughs. The Lord holds them in derision. Then he will speak to them in his wrath and terrify them in his fury, saying, as for me, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill.
What does he mean in verse 4? And the Lord, and he sits in heaven and shall laugh.
Does he find it humorous that man thinks they can do what they want to do?
Okay. Come on, let's be honest. How many times did we try to pull something on mom and dad? You know, I've made the comment, and I think we all agree, moms have eyes in the back of their heads. You agree with that?
Yeah.
Now, of course, of course, excuse me.
I said, at least don't tell the kids otherwise.
Right. Of course, you know I'm not meaning, but this is kind of like this here. God has eyes. Now, I'm a figure of speech. Don't get upset with me. A figure of speech. God has eyes in the back of his head. What do I mean by that?
He sees everything.
Nothing is secret. He's sitting back there laughing. They think they're going to pull the wool over his eyes? In our terminology? No way. And that's exactly what he says here. Remember, at this time in history of Isaiah, the enemy is the Assyrians. The Babylonians come later. And we've already referred to this many times, 2 Kings 18 and 19. When they came up against Hezekiah. You might want to read that again. The mockery that king, was it King Sennacherib, was that right? Was saying and claiming, telling the Judah that you are mistaken in trusting in your God or the God of Hezekiah. God was sitting back there just laughing because we know what happened in 2 Kings 18 and 19 of Sennacherib and the Assyrian Empire. This seems to be the same idea of what he's doing here. All right, let's go back to Isaiah chapter 18. All right, observe verses 5 and 6. Will someone read, please? Isaiah 18, verses 5 and 6.
Before the harvest, when the bud is perfect and the sour grape is ripening in the flower, he will both cut off the sprigs with pruning hooks and take away and cut down branches. They will be left together for the mountain birds of prey and for the beasts of the earth. The birds of prey will summer on them, and all the beasts of the earth will winter on them.
Did you read through 6?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what's going on here? He is simply describing here in verse 5 the growth of the crops. But before the crops are mature, they're going to be cut down. And look at verse 5. Then they will be left together for the mountain birds and so forth and so on.
You mean 6.
The Assyrians, this is all, in my understanding, dealing with the big picture, particularly right now with the Assyrians. They think they are going to succeed. They are going to accomplish what they want to accomplish, but they're going to be cut off. And that's exactly, if you go back again, I keep referring back to this, 2 Kings chapter 19, what happened to Sennacherib?
His sons killed him.
What?
His sons killed him.
Yeah. We've read it several times. He went home and he was murdered by his own family. This is again the big picture. Now, he goes on, all right, if someone would read verse 7 of again, Isaiah chapter 18.
At that time, a gift of homage will be brought to the Lord of hosts from a people tall and smooth, even from a people feared far and wide. a powerful and oppressive nation, whose land the rivers divide, to the place of the name of the Lord of hosts, even Mount Zion.
Well, now this is going to probably be a little bit clearer when we get over into chapter 19. What appears to be, my understanding is what is going to happen eventually in Egypt.
They're going to bring tribute to the Lord.
Exactly. Now, jumping way ahead, and we're going to, I think I need to do this now because we're going to see this in chapter 19. This is primarily what Alexander the Great did. He opened up this whole area. Now, I realize I'm getting way ahead because Alexander was over in the 300s. This is in the 700s. But you remember he built the city called Alexander. Jews went in flock to Egypt. Some of you might already know this history. You might be ahead of me. There were so many Jews in Egypt, there was the need of a translation, not in Hebrew, but in Greek. And that was what was called the Septuagint version in about 250 BC to really accommodate the mass number of Jews that lived in Egypt in that area. This, my understanding, is a sample of that. We're going to see that in more detail when we move over into chapter 9. All right, any thoughts or comments? Or you say, well, okay, this is hard, class. You think it's hard sitting there, you ought to try to stand up here. All right, let's turn to chapter 19. Let's break this down. We'll break this down into groups of verses. Let's read verses 1 through 4, Isaiah chapter 19.
An oracle concerning Egypt. Behold, the Lord is riding on a swift cloud and comes to Egypt. And the idols of Egypt will tremble at his presence. And the heart of the Egyptians will melt within them. And I will stir up Egyptians against Egyptians. And they will fight each other against another, and each against his neighbor. City against city, kingdom against kingdom. And the spirit of the Egyptians within them will be emptied out. And I will confound their counsel, and they will inquire of the idols and the sorcerers, and the mediums and the necromancers, and I will give over the Egyptians into the hand of a hard master, and a fierce king will rule over them, declares the Lord God of hosts.
All right, if you're interested, let's see, Ezekiel 29 deals with this also, if you're interested in wanting to further study it. This is pretty much explains itself. Now, probably the big question would be in that verse 4, and the Egyptians I will give into the hands of a cruel, now the New King James Version, a cruel master. What I read, there's two possibilities here. Was this king that I mentioned that sent the ambassadors to Egypt? He was a very cruel, I cannot even remember, even try to pronounce his name. Or this could refer to the Assyrians. And I guess it kind of is, or maybe even the Babylonians, Nebuchadnezzar. So there's thought that it could be either one of these. All right? This is, again, as I have read this many, many times, it kind of it speaks for itself. All right, verses 5 through 10. Isaiah chapter 19.
Frank, I have Caesar, Julius Caesar was the one that came into Egypt.
Who?
Julius Caesar. was so terrible to the Egyptians.
Well, okay. I mean, it could be. It could be. But the point is, they were warned about it. Yes, Don.
Well, you mentioned the Septuagint. My understanding is it was written or translated under Ptolemy IV or thereabouts, after Alexander the Great was dead and his empire was divided up into 4 parts. That's a little bit, that's definitely later on than this. But there's also that as well.
Okay.
Because he did that as a favor to the Jews, who basically had evacuated Jerusalem because of the abomination that was done to the temple, where I forget the name of the guy, of the Seleucid king, that basically sacrificed pigs to Zeus.
Right, right.
Ptolemy?
Ptolemy was playing favorites to the Jews.
Okay.
This other Seleucid king was over Palestine, a different one, I forget his name.
Okay, again, going back to tell his statement last week. Go back to chapter 1 of Isaiah and verse 1. Somebody, back up. Chapter 1, verse 1.
The vision of Isaiah the son of Amos, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah.
Concerning who?
Judah and Jerusalem.
Why?
That's who you said?
Why not Samaria? Why not Israel?
They were already
Messiah.
Okay.
The Messiah.
The Messiah, the big picture. All of this, class, don't get lost. Sometimes I have to watch myself. Don't get lost in all this. I don't understand this, so I just close the book and just shut up. If you've ever worked a jigsaw puzzle, this is what we're working on. The only difference is the jigsaw puzzle you already had the picture. We don't have the picture. We see the picture in the process of being made. Well, yeah, we do. We already have the picture. We're cheating because we've already got it. They didn't. They didn't. We may understand this totally different than they did because we have the big picture before us. They did not. All right, let's read 5 through 10. Isaiah chapter 19.
The waters from the sea will dry up, and the river will be parched and dry.
Now the sea there is the Nile.
The canals will emit a stench. The streams of Egypt will thin out and dry up. The reeds and the rushes will rot away. The bulrushes by the Nile, by the edge of the Nile, and all the sown fields by the Nile will become dry, be driven away and be no more. And the fishermen will lament, and all those who cast a line into the Nile will mourn, and those who spread nets on the waters will pine away. Moreover, the manufacturers of linen made from combed flax, and the weavers of white cloth will be utterly dejected, and the pillars of Egypt will be crushed. All the hired laborers will be grieved in soul.
That pretty well explains itself. Because of how much their economy was based upon the Nile River, or called here the sea, and the effects of it. My understanding was, if I can remember correctly, there were certain times of the year when the Nile River flooded. And of course, it made, I guess you could call it the marshland, and that's where some of these things grew. And then it would go down every year. But in what we're describing here is not going to do that. And the effect of that. Some of you have lived in areas where you have different diseases, and I mean, as far as agriculture and whatever, weather, That's the same thing here. All right, let's read 11 through 15. Isaiah chapter 19.
Princes of Zone are mere fools. The advice of Pharaoh's wisest advisors has become stupid. How can you men say to Pharaoh, I am a son of the wise, a son of ancient kings? Well then, where are your wise men? Please let them tell you, and let them understand what the Lord of hosts has purposed against Egypt. The princes of Zon have acted foolishly. The princes of Memphis are deluded. Those who are the cornerstone of her tribes have led Egypt astray. The Lord has mixed within her a spirit of distortion. They have led Egypt astray in all that it does, as a drunken man staggers in his vomit. There will be no work for Egypt, which its head or tail, its palm branch or bulrush may do.
And so again, this is, as I understand this, and that the verses 11 through 15, their counselors, their so-called wise, will all fail. That's the bottom line. Now, this gets into a little bit more difficult part. All right, let's read 16 and 17 verses.
In that day Egypt will be like women and will be afraid and fear because of the waving of the hand of the Lord of hosts, which he waves over it. And the land of Judah will be a terror to Egypt. Everyone who makes mention of it will be afraid to himself because of the counsel of the Lord of hosts, which he has determined against it.
All right, this phrase, like women, is also in Jeremiah. This is not an insult. It's simply dealing with the idea of physical strength, is what it boils down to. Verse 17, and the land of Judah will be a terror to Egypt. Everyone who makes mention of it will be afraid in himself because of the counsel of the Lord of hosts, which he has determined against it.
I wonder if this has any reference to the time of the Maccabees. The Maccabees were in about 150, sometime before Christ.
It could.
They destroyed a lot of countries.
Right.
Gained a lot of territory.
It could also, remember, it could deal with what's immediate and what is going to happen later. I don't know. I don't have that thought. But what is interesting is in 2 Chronicles 33 and verse 11, the Assyrians have taken Israel away. Okay? 2 Chronicles 33 and verse 11 and surrounding scriptures. What I was able to gain from this, the Egyptians were fearful now that the next step for the Assyrians would be Judah, and then after Judah would be Egypt. That's my understanding of why they say the terror of Egypt toward Judah, because of what they were fearful of what the Assyrians might accomplish now that they have overrun or taken control of Israel or Samaria. Next Judah and next Egypt. All right? That's my understanding. Let's read beginning in verse 18. Let's see. Let's just read 18 and 19. Somebody?
In that day, 5 cities in the land of Egypt will be speaking the language of Canaan and swearing allegiance to the Lord of hosts. One will be called the City of Destruction. In that day, there will be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt. and a pillar to the Lord near its border. Keep going.
Well, now again, was this going to happen in this period of time? We know it happened later, as we had made reference to Alexander the Great, where Egypt became open to not the gospel. I don't understand. He's talking about the gospel at this time. That became later. I have somewhere right here. I have a map that shows where all the nations were from present in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost, Acts chapter 2. Yep, Egypt was there, and all the others. But now, is that what he's talking about here, or was something going to happen before the gospel? And that's what it seems to me, in my understanding, because again, particularly, well, again, I'm not all up to date on all this history of particularly what Alexander the Great did in. Maybe this is not a right word, but I'll use it. It's kind of unifying this whole area. And as I said, he built the city, Alexander, from his own name. There was a temple built there. And I don't remember exactly the time frame on that. And then again, the need for the Bible, because one of the things that Alexander the Great did was establish a, quote, universal language, being Greek. And that was therefore the necessity for the Old Testament Hebrew to be translated into Greek. Is this part of what he's talking about? It could be. All right, let's try it on this. This is tough. This is tough, but it can become a lot easier with your own personal study. I emphasize this every week. You're not going to get it sitting here for this 45-minute class. You're just not going to get it. And I hope the old idea, wet your whistle, that you will pursue. It's not that difficult to understand the basic idea. To get into the nitty-gritty, I'm not going to do that. All right, let's read on. Let's see, where are we starting now? In verse 20? Verse 20? Somebody?
It will become a sign and a witness to the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt, for they will cry to the Lord because of oppressors, and he will send them a Savior and a champion, and he will deliver them. Thus the Lord will make himself known to Egypt, and the Egyptians will know the Lord in that day. They will even worship with sacrifice and offering, and will make a vow to the Lord and perform it. The Lord will strike Egypt, striking but healing. So they will return to the Lord, and he will respond to them and will heal them.
Now stop there for a minute. Did you notice that? I've got in my notes here these words underlined. He says, the Lord will strike Egypt, he will strike and heal. Those of you that have studied it, did you catch that? They will return to the Lord, and he will entreat them. Now, is he talking, of course, ultimately the gospel? But is that what he's talking about here at this time and the several hundred years in the future? That's something that maybe is up for grabs. All right, continue.
The Lord will strike Egypt, striking but healing, so they will return to the Lord, and he will respond to them and will heal them. In that day there will be a highway from Egypt to Assyria, and the Assyrians will come into Egypt, and the Egyptians into Assyria. And the Egyptians will worship with the Assyrians. In that day Israel will be the third party with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing in the midst of the earth, whom the Lord of hosts has blessed, saying, Blessed is Egypt, my people, and Assyria the work of my hands, and Israel my inheritance.
Okay, now we know that this was fully accomplished under preaching the gospel. But did this happen in some degree from here until the day of Pentecost? It would appear so from the history. Because again, my understanding of the history, one of the objectives of Alexander the Great was to Greekanize, if there's such a word, the world, and he did a pretty good job of it, in my understanding. I wrote down here his ministry was 332 to 323. He died at 32 years of age. He died at 32 years of age. I read somewhere years ago, I don't know whether this was just a statement, that he cried because there was no more land to conquer. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but that was his objective. 32 years old. What's that, 11 years? Yeah, 11 years in what he accomplished.
How young he was.
And
How young he was when he started.
right,
Yeah.
right. And of course, class, this wasn't by accident. What did this man do? In preparation for the gospel message to the known world. It's not by accident. All right, see, did we finish up all this?
Yeah, the chapter, yeah.
Okay. All right, next week, this little brief chapter of chapter 20, just what is it, 6 verses, but don't let the little 6 verses discourage you from, it's not very important. All right, I want to encourage you the best I can. I realize there's a long gap between ages here. There's a long gap between Bible knowledge here. Don't cop out. Don't hang it up. I can't learn. Please don't ever say that. As this old body begins to deteriorate, I think Paul said something about that, didn't he? As the outward man perishes, the inward man is renewed day by day. I hope this will be a challenge to us, not simply 45 minutes of boredom, but a challenge.
I think God gave each of us different levels of an intellect.
Right.
But with whatever God gave us in intellect, we need to study because that's what we're told to do. We just do the best we can do.
That's all we can do. All right, thank you.
Hey, how you doing?
This morning, I was